In the spring of 2014, the quiet town of Waukesha, Wisconsin, became the setting for a crime so bizarre it shook the entire world. It's a case that completely blurred the lines between a childhood fantasy and a truly brutal reality. A story that crawled out of the darkest corners of the internet. It's about three 12-year-old girls who were supposed to be best friends, whose lives were all about to be shattered in a sunlit park. One of them would be left for dead, another would be diagnosed with a severe mental illness, and the third would be trapped in a shared delusion that ended in terrifying violence. This isn't just a story about a crime, it's a warning about the power of the internet, the fragility of a young mind, and the horrifying place where mental illness and online myths collide. On May 31st, 2014, in that quiet Wisconsin town, two 12-year-old girls led their best friend into the woods. What happened next became an internet legend and a real-life nightmare. They stabbed her 19 times, and their reason? To prove they were loyal to a fictional monster from the internet. This is the story of the Slender Man stabbing, a case that showed just how terrifyingly powerful online culture can be. How did a viral meme lead to such a brutal attack? Let's find out. The story starts, like a lot of childhood friendships do, with a sleepover. It was Friday, May 30th, 2014, and Morgan Geyser was celebrating her 12th birthday. Her two best friends, Anissa Weyer and Peyton Leutner, were right there with her. On the surface, they just seemed like three normal middle schoolers. They went roller skating, played on their phones, and then settled in for the night at Morgan's house. Peyton, who everyone called Bella, had been friends with Morgan since they were in the 4th grade. She'd made friends with Morgan after seeing her sitting all by herself at lunch, and described her as lonely, but funny. But just beneath the surface of this normal preteen sleepover, a dark plan was taking shape. For months, Morgan and Anissa had been falling deeper and deeper into an obsession, a shared belief in a fictional creature known only as the Slender Man. That night, while Peyton was asleep, the other two girls whispered about the horrible thing they believed they had to do. Their first plan was to attack Peyton in her sleep, tape her mouth, and stab her in the neck. But they backed out, deciding to wait until the morning instead. The next day, they suggested they all go for a walk to a nearby park. They picked a spot called David's Park, a wooded area that gave them the privacy they were looking for. Peyton had no reason to suspect anything. She went with them, having no idea that her best friends had packed a kitchen knife, or that they'd been planning to kill her for months. As they walked into the woods, the girls suggested a game of hide and seek. It was just a trick to get Peyton into a vulnerable spot. Anissa reportedly told Morgan, "Go ballistic, go crazy." Morgan then handed Anissa the knife, but Anissa couldn't do it. For a chilling moment, they hesitated. A final, fleeting chance for them to turn back, but they didn't. Morgan took the knife back, while Anissa stood by and encouraged her. Morgan Geyser tackled her best friend, Peyton Leutner, to the ground and started stabbing her 19 times. In her arms, her legs, her chest. One of the wounds missed a major artery near her heart by less than a millimeter. After the attack, the two girls told a bleeding and terrified Peyton that they were going to get help. That was a lie. They just turned and walked away, leaving their friend for dead on the forest floor. They believed they had just completed a necessary sacrifice. Peyton Leutner should have died in those woods, stabbed 19 times, and abandoned by the two people she trusted most in the world. She lay there bleeding, but with an incredible force of will. She refused to give up. She later told police that when she tried to get up, she couldn't see, walk, or even breathe right. But she found the strength to drag herself out of the woods and crawl toward a nearby bike path. That's where a cyclist named Greg Steinberg found her. He saw a small shape on the grass and thought it was an animal at first. When he got closer, he realized it was a young girl, covered in blood. He immediately called 911. When the first officer arrived, he asked her who did this to her. She named her friend Morgan Geyser. Paramedics rushed Peyton to the hospital, where she went through hours of surgery. She had wounds to her liver, pancreas, and stomach. That she survived was unbelievable. Meanwhile, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Way were miles away. After leaving Peyton, they just started walking. They didn't go home. They didn't call for help. Instead, they began a long journey on foot, heading north. Hours later, a sheriff's deputy saw two young girls walking along the side of Interstate 94. It was Morgan and Anissa. They were calm, almost shy, and carrying a backpack. When the deputy questioned them, their story was chillingly casual. They told him they had just stabbed their friend, and they told him why. They were on their way to meet the Slender Man. They believed his mansion was somewhere in the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest, hundreds of miles away. By killing Peyton, they thought they would become his proxies or servants, proving their loyalty and protecting their own families from him. During their interrogations, their behavior was just unsettling. Anissa seemed to feel guilty, but Morgan showed no empathy at all. When an officer asked about Peyton, Morgan calmly asked if she was dead. The girls were covered in blood, but they seemed to be living in a completely different reality from the violence they had just committed. It became clear pretty quickly to investigators that this wasn't just a case of kids being cruel. They were dealing with something much more complex, a crime born from a deep and terrifying delusion. To understand how two 12-year-old girls could do something so horrible, you have to understand who they did it for: the Slender Man. This character isn't some ancient myth or a figure from old folklore. He was born entirely on the internet. The Slender Man was created back in 2009 on an internet forum called Something Awful. A user named Eric Knudsen posted in a Photoshop contest that challenged people to create paranormal-looking images. Knudsen submitted 2 black and white photos of children with a tall, thin, ghost-like figure in a black suit lurking behind them. He was unnaturally tall, with long, thin limbs, and most disturbingly, a completely blank, featureless face. Knudsen added little cryptic captions to his pictures, hinting at a dark story. One of them read, "We didn't want to go, we didn't want to kill them, but its persistent silence and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time." That simple creation just took off. The character went viral, spreading far beyond the original forum and taking on a life of its own. He became the star of creepypasta, a name for horror stories and urban legends that get copied and pasted all over the internet. Unlike classic monsters, the Slender Man had no official story. This meant a whole community of writers, artists, and filmmakers could add to his mythology. Stories showed him stalking and kidnapping people, especially children, usually in the woods. Video series, like Marble Hornets, created an alternate reality game that blurred the lines between fiction and a fake reality even more. For most people, this was just spooky fun. It was the modern version of ghost stories told around a digital campfire. But for Morgan Geyser and Anissa Way, the Slender Man was real. They found the character on the Creepypasta Wiki, a website that collects all these horror stories. They spent hours reading the tales, soaking up the lore, and becoming more and more convinced that he actually existed. A psychologist would later say that the website was very convincing, especially for the impressionable minds of 12-year-olds. For Morgan and Anissa, this wasn't a story. It was a truth they had to follow. Their belief was terrifyingly specific. They thought Slender Man could read their minds, teleport, and would hurt their families if they didn't do what he wanted. The only way to satisfy him, to prove they were loyal and keep their families safe, was to become his proxies by killing someone. This delusion became the driving force in their lives. They had been planning the attack for months, and their target was Peyton Leutner. In their twisted reality, this horrible act wasn't a choice, but a grim duty demanded by a monster from the internet. The Slender Man stabbing makes us ask some really hard questions about mental health, internet culture, and the justice system. It's a story with layers of tragedy that are still unfolding. If you think these deep dives into complex cases are important, please think about subscribing to the channel and ringing that notification bell. It really helps us keep bringing these stories to you. Now let's look at what the justice system did when it was faced with two kids who committed an adult crime for a fictional reason. The legal battle that followed the stabbing was just as bizarre as the crime itself. The state of Wisconsin had a huge problem on its hands. How do you prosecute two 12-year-old girls for attempted murder when their motive was to please a fictional internet character? Because the crime was so serious, attempted first-degree intentional homicide, Morgan and Anissa were charged as adults, which caused a lot of controversy right away. Their case wouldn't be about if they did it, but about their mental state when it happened. Both girls pleaded not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. This changed the whole focus of the trial from the crime scene to what was going on inside their minds. And what the court-appointed psychologists found was deeply disturbing. Morgan Geyser, the girl who actually used the knife, was diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia. This is a severe and very rare condition in children that causes hallucinations and delusions. For Morgan, the Slender Man wasn't just something she believed in. He was a real presence in her life. During evaluations, she said she talked with him, along with other fictional characters like Lord Voldemort and one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. She saw unicorns and thought she could talk to animals. Her schizophrenia had probably been there for years, undiagnosed and untreated, which created the perfect environment for the Slender Man delusion to grow into a command. Anissa Weir's diagnosis was different, but just as important. Psychologists found she was suffering from a shared delusional disorder, a rare condition sometimes called folie à deux. This is when a delusion is passed from one person to another. Basically, through her close friendship with Morgan, Anissa had adopted Morgan's schizophrenic delusions as her own. One psychologist testified that Anissa's 12-year-old brain just wasn't able to tell the difference between the convincing fiction online and reality, especially when her charismatic and delusional friend was reinforcing it. She believed in the Slender Man because Morgan did, and she went along with the crime out of a twisted sense of loyalty and a shared terror. The trials were held separately. In August 2017, Anissa Weir pleaded guilty to a lesser charge. A jury then found that she was mentally ill during the attack, which meant she wasn't held criminally responsible. She was sentenced to spend up to 25 years in a state mental health institution. A few months later, Morgan Geyser also took a plea deal. Like Anissa, she was found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. The judge gave her the maximum sentence, 40 years of supervision under the state's mental health system. Both girls were sent to the Winnebago Mental Health Institute, a secure psychiatric facility, not to be punished, but to be treated. The Slender Man stabbing left a permanent mark on everyone involved, and started a national conversation. It became the focus of a panic about the dangers of the internet. Parents and teachers started worrying about what their kids were seeing online and the potential for fiction to spill into the real world. The creepypasta community itself had to face the real-world impact of its stories, and many websites added disclaimers to stress that their content was fiction. For the three girls at the heart of the story, the years that followed have been a long and difficult road. Peyton Leutner's story is one of incredible resilience. After the attack, she went through a painful physical recovery. The emotional scars were just as deep. For years, she slept with a pair of broken scissors under her pillow, but she refused to be defined as a victim. She went back to school, did well, and planned to go into the medical field, inspired by the people who saved her life. In a 2019 interview, she said something amazing. When asked what she would say to Morgan Geyser, she said she would thank her, just because of what she did. "I have the life I have now," Peyton explained. "I really like it, and I have a plan. I didn't have a plan when I was 12, and now I do because of everything that I went through." Anissa Weier spent nearly 4 years at the Winnebago Mental Health Institute. In September 2021, at age 19, she was granted a conditional release. A judge decided she wasn't a threat anymore, but her release came with strict rules. She has to live with her father, continue getting psychiatric treatment, have her internet use monitored, and wear a GPS tracker. Morgan Geyser's path has been longer. She has spent over a decade in psychiatric care. Her requests for release were denied several times, but after years of intense therapy and medication, mental health experts testified that she had made huge progress and no longer believed in the Slender Man. In March 2025, a judge approved a conditional release plan for Morgan, now in her early 20s, which led to her release in July 2025. The plan says she'll be moved to a group home with tight restrictions, including GPS monitoring and medication management. Her location is being kept confidential to protect both her and Peyton. She will remain under state supervision until she is 53 years old, the full term of her 40-year sentence. The Slender Man stabbing is a story that doesn't have any easy answers. It's a tragedy with 3 victims: the girl who was brutally attacked, and the 2 girls who were lost to a profound mental illness that pushed them to do something unimaginable. It's a chilling case that shows how thin the line between the virtual and the real can be, especially for vulnerable minds. More than anything, this is a story about the devastating fallout of untreated mental illness. For Morgan Geyser, schizophrenia twisted her reality. For Anissa Weier, a shared delusion dragged her into that same nightmare. And for Peyton Leutner, their illnesses led to a trauma that almost cost her everything. But it's also a story of incredible strength. Peyton's survival and her drive to build a new life for herself is a testament to her courage. And the supervised releases of Anissa and Morgan represent a hope for rehabilitation, a belief that even after a horrific act, treatment can offer a path forward. The shadow of the Slender Man might have faded, but the echoes of what happened in that Wisconsin park will be felt for a long time.